Hopefully this time a bit shorter introduction. Modal verbs can, may, must, shall, and will. Personally, I have a soft spot for shall, as it really sounds like proper English, and while some consider it a downright anachronism, even according to the modern guidelines, it still has its place in the language, be it a more formal, more literary denotation, courteous questions, proposals, a sort of a look into the future, the we shall see, the quite famous you shall not pass. But anyway, that is only one of them. Moreover, it is the one that is used the least, as they are modal. They decide the manner of the main verb most of the time. Well, sometimes we technically do not conjugate them. I can, you can, he can. Some of them do exist in the past tense. For example, can as could, and for other tenses we use be able to, be allowed to, and so on and so forth. There are some many differences, then there are some rather significant ones, such as the one between will and going to in the degree of certainty. Then we have them combined with other auxiliary verbs, should have, could have, might have. Then we can also distinguish slightly different meanings of the second form, I was supposed to, and I should have something. Obviously, I'm merely skirting the surface of this. The main two sections for me are the present modal verbs and the past ones. And I do believe that I have a fairly decent idea on how to use them, when to use them. So I will just move on to the next topic of this intro, which still is focusing on my fixation on the original, purely imagination driven storytelling. And here I'm going to admit to something. The very core of every one of my books, the pick up an item, find a person, slay the bad guy, find a cave, explore it, meet at a pub, and so on, can hardly ever be fully original, truly full of twists and new ideas, actually new and different. But I would like to at least try to build a unique world for that to happen in, full of characters with personalities, quirks, habits, and customs that I would not have read by then for the millionth time, and whom I also would be able to distinguish from our real world's people. The settings should have a completely different history, socio-political climate, even evolution, biology, anatomy, different food, even tastes, and that all should, in my opinion, create a society where certain things we earthlings would, might, could, even should consider to be an anomaly of sorts, or even something completely unthinkable, unreasonable, or simply a thing that should not or cannot exist would be the norm, and vice versa. And I'm not even speaking about totally different races of beings other than humans, sentient. There I want to go so much further that my imagination and my vocabulary are unable to keep up with these ridiculous demands of mine, but it was I who had made them in the first place, before I even started thinking about writing a story of my own. Nonetheless, that is what I want to do, even though that I am almost sure, no, I am sure that I will not be able to conjure some flawless plotline, perfect without any plot holes, one that would end up truly rocking the world of storytelling. I want to at least attempt to surround everything with something that makes sense, that is different from potatoes and horses and the hero's journey and the usual. And no, that is most definitely not some jab. I do not think that that is how every single story has to be. That, however, is how a story that I personally would love to read must be, which also means that is how every single story I will ever write will to an extent look like, as even if I am able to somehow craft an interesting premise and the bare bones structure of a story, unless I am confident that I will be able to adorn it with all the accessories that I have been mentioning so far in my videos, and much more that I simply lack the words and thoughts to properly express. There is not even a reason for me to consider expanding upon the initial idea, for unless it is truly set elsewhere, I have a difficult time imagining myself truly swept by the story, enjoying myself. And that is all I am looking for when picking up a tale of any kind as of late. Pure positivity, which is becoming an arduous task indeed lately. Speaking of short introductions, enough rapid arrows. Our paragons of justice heroically saved Longpole and are now ready for more adventures. Here, for example, we can hear them discussing the latest news as Jindra is reading them about long distance runners, or in this case, walkers, undertaking journeys of several hundreds of kilometers with no stops, although that part in particular is not exactly well defined here in the story. What does it mean? No rest? But anyway, Yarka proposes that they attempt a similar endeavor during the upcoming holiday, when they will have 3 whole days to try and push themselves, although at a slightly reduced difficulty. And as they are discussing the details, such as if they are going to announce it to the rest of the other side, Speed is vehemently against that, as failure is quite likely, considering how impromptu these arrangements of theirs are. Then in the club room the day before, hoping for good weather, Redcap arrives with a sign citing their aspirations, the goal being 100 kilometers without rest. I did mention that it does not entirely make sense. Well, anyway, there is another line with a detachable square of paper which says their current mileage. Then there is Redcap the next day proudly holding his creation. Another stop is when they leave the tram or the train or the bus When its conductor sees the sign, he comments on their rather heavy-looking luggage and the possibility that they will be too tired to continue after barely 10, but still is supportive of this idea. After that, it's finally time to start this latest idea of theirs. After about 2 hours, the suggestion to stop, and here is where the no rest line begins slightly wavering in its sense. But anyway, there is a river or a pond or a lake of sorts right next to the road, and 30 minutes of some swimming does sound quite appealing considering the current circumstances. Tantalizing enough for even Yarka to almost threaten everyone else into participating by withholding his resource from everyone unwilling to enjoy the water for a bit. But obviously, there is no one insane enough to decline respite such as this, especially when refreshments are involved as well. The only one not immediately submerged in the refreshing water is Indra, who decided to take it upon himself to take care of the sign and for the first time switch the number of the distance covered so far to their first milestone, 10 kilometers. But then around 30 kilometers in, despite these boys being tough and athletic, this whole venture starts gnawing at their resolve. It is Redcap who notes that while it would be an awe-inspiring feat and achievement, doing nothing but walking for the entirety of this holiday would also mean to practically sacrifice it without really being able to experience anything noteworthy other than the endless repeating cycle of putting one foot ahead the other. And surprisingly, unsurprisingly enough, Mirek agrees to, instead of continuing this challenge of theirs, find a nice body of water and camp next to it, do some club activities, and all in all live their youth. So a short break by the road when Mirek studies the map, trying to choose a destination that would fit their criteria, suit their needs. Apparently an aptly named pond. That word in English sounds inadequate to properly describe what it means in Czech. A man-made body of water for various purposes, usually fish farming, but pond itself to me somehow alludes to something smaller in size, maybe basins or reservoirs would be closer to what rybník means in Czech. Anyway, they are big, and there is one about 20 kilometers away from their current position, an enormous one right next to a forest, which would be an ideal location were it not for the distance, as Indra, who is in the process of breaking the sign in half, declares he is unable to march on for even 5. So they need an alternative means of transportation to their now definitely tired appendages. Fortunately, they are right next to a road, one that is used by cars. Unluckily for them, though, for the longest time, all of them are fully packed, and as Mirek correctly remarks, trying to hitchhike a normal car, family car, with 5 people would be unwise, and impossible. But after many unsuccessful attempts, one truck does stop for them, with the driver inviting them to hop on inside when asked to take them at least in the direction of the pond called fishery. Might be a somewhat apt translation of the name. His answer is slightly cryptic. He promises to take them somewhere. On the road, though, every single turn has the boys flinging across the entire cargo space due to the speed and sharpness of the driver's driving skills, and recklessness is not the only problem, as they have been on the road for quite a while, much longer than the potential time needed to reach their destination, and even attempts at banging on the divider or the screen separating them from the quote unquote Samaritan yields no results, which in turn leads to this little adventure of theirs becoming slightly more complicated, which I am going to attempt to describe in the next video.